Will Elijah be at my son's bris? The Moyle got down to Tachlis and started asking his important list of questions. What is your address? 6070 Pine Street, apartment 204, Bethesda, Maryland. We're by Strathmore, near the Grosvenor Metro in the Parkside condos. What was I saying? He asked for my address, not directions. I was trying to make small talk. I was sharing more than was needed. People talk more when they have something to hide. What did I have to hide? I'm having a son due in 4 weeks. We're planning a bris 8 days later. We need a moil. That's how these things are supposed to work. He continued, now what are your Hebrew names? Well mine is Avraham ben Gershon, and my wife, well you see my wife doesn't have a Hebrew name because she isn't Jewish. Here I cringed, tensed up, and braced myself for an awkward pause, a nasty retort, or who knows what. None of that happened because he immediately jumped in. Of course, that's exactly what you need to do. I just did a bris last week in Rockville for a couple who was in your exact situation. I will do the bris with the intention that it is for a later conversion. What was that date again? It's May 28th, which you should know, if he was born on the due date, that bris would then be on Shavuot, so it's problematic. And here he cut me off. He said, no. We wouldn't have to worry about the bris being on Shabbos or Yom Tov because he won't be born Jewish. He explained the halacha around the Jewish interpretation of the law, that the only time it's required to break Shabbat or a holiday to perform the bris is when the baby is born naturally from a Jewish mother. In our case, a non-Jewish mother, it's prohibited of using the tools for the bris on Shabbat or Yom Tov. So he also made it sound like the ceremony might look a little different, but assured me that he would help my son get through this important milestone with as little trauma as possible. So I ended the call and knew that right away that something left me unsettled about the whole thing. Is there something wrong with my son? Will he be born a lesser person in our community? Because according to traditional authorities, he's not yet Jewish? Who's this guy to tell me my kid isn't Jewish enough to be circumcised on Shabbat? Who is he to make changes to a service for my kid? I'm Jewish. I'm born of Jewish parents, learner in Torah, do of mitzvot, Gemilut Chasidim, lover of the land of Israel, donator to Jewish organizations. I go to services. I know how to lead services. I'm here at the SermonSlam. Isn't that enough? My wife and I have created a Jewish home together. Anyone that has eaten at our Shabbat table knows. There are mezuzahs on the doorpost, 2 sets of dishes in the cupboards, and Kiddush every Friday night. Isn't all of that enough? At a traditional bris, a chair is set out for Elijah the prophet. It's the same Elijah we open the door for at Passover Seder. It's the same Elijah from the Bible that performs all kinds of miracles to prove the sovereignty and power of God. The Midrash tells us that despite all of the miracle making, and under some pretty difficult times, that the people of Israel neglected their obligation under the Brit to circumcise their sons. Elijah complained to God all that had happened, and God was disappointed that Elijah doubted the loyalty of his people. So to teach him a lesson, he commanded Elijah to bring that message of the Brit to every Brit Milah, bring the message of the covenant to every circumcision. So when my son is born, be it the 8th day or not, do we have to set out a chair? And will Elijah come to sit in it? It matters to me as a parent because I don't want my son to be born with some kind of Jewish handicap. As a Jew, I want to know that the community will fully welcome him like any other. Will our intent to raise this kid Jewish be enough to get Elijah there? Or will we have another, more Jewish bris to attend that day? Our parents are going to be there. My mom is bringing the smoked fish. Our friends and family will come. Many of them are Jewish too. What about Elijah? When I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and really take the time to think it through, I'm drawn to another story. During the time when Elijah was fleeing for his life, in his time of despair, he turned to God for help. The Lord passed him by, and Elijah found him not in a great strong wind that broke the mountain into pieces, and not in an earthquake, and not in fire, but in a still, small voice. Where is this voice? What happens that we all know that voice because it is the same voice from the Revelation at Sinai. Let me explain. The rabbis teach us that all of the Jews, even the ones from the generations that followed, were there at Sinai to receive the commandments. One tradition suggests in the moment of revelation, God himself was not able to recite the entirety of the Decalogue. His voice was so terrible and awesome for anyone to hear. All he uttered was the very first letter of the very first commandment, which is the Aleph. What is the sound of the Aleph? We don't know, because it makes no sound without another vowel or letter next to it. It can only be said with a still, small voice. We are all there to hear the still, small voice, the one that Elijah heard and the one that he brings to every bris as the messenger. If I get really still and quiet and try to remember what it was like to stand at the foot of the mountain, what do I see? The thunder and lightning above, my parents behind me, all of you there as the Jews of this generation. And when I look down, cradled in my arms, I see my son.